Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to this course on Vedic astrological chart interpretation, specifically in relationship to timing of the Dasha cycles, and specifically the Vimshottari Dasha as described within Brihat Hora Shastra. Over these years, being involved in astrology more publicly, online, doing lectures, I get numerous emails and questions about the timing of an individual's chart. And I thought this would be a good opportunity, a good time to explore ways to understand your own chart through the dashas. Now, this is not going to be easy, and it's not going to be simple. One of the difficulties I do find with questions that I'm asked are coming from people who think about dashas too simplistically. So my goal with these videos, with this course, is to help to resolve that issue. And why do I say that? Well, people will write and they'll say, well, my K2 is in the third house. What does this mean? I'm in K2 Dasha. My Mars is in the 8th house, in Leo. What does this mean? I'm going to be going into the Mars Dasha in a few months. And I have a hard time with those questions because in order to answer them, they require a foundation in understanding the chart as a whole, as well as understanding the complexity of what goes into a particular dasha. Now, it is true that there will be certain themes for each planetary cycle, but it will be very different for everyone's chart who has, just a different chart. We all have different charts. So when someone's going into a Mars period and their Mars is in the 8th house, that's not going to be the same as someone else who has Mars in the 8th house, even though their Mars is in the same position. Why is that? Because as you'll see when we get further into this video, I actually have a chart example here, that Mars is in a different position from all of the other planets as it is in your chart to another person's chart. That Mars may be in different positions throughout the Vargas or the divisional charts. So one person's Mars may still be in Leo, the other person's Mars is in Leo, but based on the degree, it's going to impact how that Mars functions throughout the Vargas, the divisional charts. And that will change how that dasha expresses itself through different areas of your life. So again, I want to encourage you to please go back and review the free Introduction to Astrology video course that's on this YouTube site. It's 52 videos because you need to have a foundation in understanding the chart first. I'd like to encourage you to pick up the Art and Science of Vedic Astrology series, that book series, because that will also give you insights into chart interpretation. And these principles that we have here on the side, these come specifically from the Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, Volume 1, and they are based on principles that we find in Brihat Hora Shastra, which is sometimes considered to be the Bible of Vedic astrology. So what are we going to do? Well, in this particular video, we are going to look at Brihat Hora Shastra. We're going to look at these principles and discuss them so that you understand that there are numerous things you have to look at within a chart before you can make a definite assertion about what a particular time cycle or a particular planet's going to give. And let's break it down step by step. So number one, you have to know how to read a chart. So before you can get into the dashas, you have to understand how to read a chart. So refer back to the videos, the free Introduction to Astrology, a Vedic Astrology course on this site. You can go to AshevilleVedicAstrology.com under the Learn Kriya Yoga tab, and there are numerous courses available, even a specific course, MP3 course on the Vimshottari Dasha and how to use that with transits for predictive measures and understanding the trends of your life, which uses examples, pulls from Brihat Hora Shastra. So if you want to get very detailed about this study, you can go and get that course. Otherwise, just stay tuned on this channel And we'll do our best to explain the fundamental principles of astrology in regards to the Vimshottari Dasha system. Now, once you know how to read a chart, along with that, you need to know what each planet means. Because each dasha that you go into, whatever that planet means by its very nature, that's what's going to come more fully into your life during that time, usually. So we need to know what the planet rules over, what the planet relates to. Again, that's in The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, Volume 1. There's chapters on each planet and what they mean. Also in the free video course, I spend one video on each planet. In The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, Volume 2, in the appendix, there are charts specifically telling you what each planet means in each house, as well as in each Varga. So this helps to get the information within your mind so that you can do good astrology. Once you know what the planets mean, we also need to understand what do the houses mean. And why is that? Because yes, you may be in a Mars Dasha, but what does Mars rule within your chart? Does it rule the 3rd house? Does it rule the 8th house? Does it rule the 10th house? That's going to give you some more insights in relationship to what is going to be manifested during that particular Dasha. And once you know the house meanings, you can also combine it with the house that the planet is in. So if Mars is the 10th house lord, and it goes into the 8th, well, now we need to consider, what does it mean? Number 1, that it's Mars. Number 2, that it's the 10th lord. And then it goes into the 8th. Well, the 8th is the house of flaw, of breaks, of sudden changes, of drama, of transformation. So maybe if Mars rules the 10th and it goes into the 8th, we will see a change, a transformation in relationship to your activity in the world, your karma in the world, your possibly even your career. And this will be true for every planet. So you know the meaning of the planet by its very nature. You understand what it means in relationship to the house it rules. And you need to think about, where does that planet go into another house? How can that combine? We also need to consider the position of the planet, of the dasha that we're discussing, that planetary dasha, from every other planet within the chart. And this will make more sense as we get further into this video, when I actually use the example that I have here. But I'm just giving you a sense of what is really involved in looking at dashas. And again, just to reiterate, what are dashas? They are time periods when each planet is given the capacity to take center stage within your life, which is why we have all of these different chapters within our life. So maybe you have a dasha, the 7th lord. Venus rules your 7th house. So when you go into the Venus dasha, relationships are going to come into play. Business-related matters are going to come into play. Because if Venus rules the 7th, well, it's ruling the 10th from the 10th. And so that's where the business comes into play there. And then maybe that shifts. And after Venus, you go into a sun cycle. Well, now the sun is in your 12th house. Or maybe it rules your 12th house. These are just ideas. Well, the 12th house is pulling away from the world, a time of retirement. So maybe you're not so actively engaged in the world, or you're living in a foreign country, or whatever it might be. So that's why we have these different cycles, because we are given a particular chart, and when each dasha runs, the sun dasha or Venus dasha or Ketu dasha, whatever it might be, each time a new planet takes center stage, and we know that by the dasha that's running, it will shift our attention, our direction in life. So this is very important. Now let's begin with, over on this side, with these thoughts, these principles. So we've already discussed that lordship is important. So whenever you go into a planetary cycle, you figure out, what does that planet rule over? Whatever planet, whatever house that planet rules over, that's going to take center stage within your life. If it's the 6th house, maybe it's paying off debt or dealing with enemies. 10th house, career. 2nd house, more responsibility towards finances and resources. Again, how do we know this? Because if we've done our homework, we know what each house means. We look to see what is the position of the Dasha planet. Is it in an angle, 1, 4, 7, 10? Well, that's more active, so you're going to find that maybe it's easier for you to engage this planet, to work hard with this planet and get results. Is it in the 5th or 9th, the trines? Well, that's more grace, so the positive things of that planet may come into play more easily for you without having to try to work so hard. Is it in the 6th, 8th, or 12th? Well, there could be some hardship or struggle related to it. So we have to see what planet is running and where does that planet go within the birth chart. And again, keep in mind, this does apply to the birth chart, the Rashi, but we also need to look at these within the Vargas as well, which is giving you an insight into how subtle and complex it might be to read the dashas accurately. We need to understand the aspects and conjunctions to the dasha lord. If we have Saturn, we're running a Saturn dasha, but he's getting aspected by all of his friends, Mercury and Venus. Well, that Saturn dasha could possibly work very well, and that's a Lajatati Avashta. So to learn about those and how those influence the dasha, again, there's a video on this channel, and at AshevilleVedicAstrology.com, there's a whole course on the Lajatati Avashtas. Maybe we have a Jupiter cycle running, and maybe that Jupiter is getting starved by its enemies, Mercury and Venus. So while we have all these positive hopes for Jupiter, yet if we would have done our homework and looked through, we would have saw that Jupiter is getting starved by Mercury. Jupiter is with Venus, where it's also getting starved. So that Jupiter cycle can't quite give the results that we would expect during that time. And this is all the things that we have to incorporate. And if I didn't say it in the beginning, I am going to go through each particular planet as a Mahadasha Lord in this video series. So we'll look at it from Brihat Parashar Hora Shastra to see what does that ancient text say about these particular time periods within your life. Now, if we look at Dasha results according to planetary strength, when will a planet work better? Well, if a planet is strong and well placed by sign, so it's in a friend sign, it usually gives well-being and abundance in accord with that particular planet. So Mercury, placed in the sign of the Sun or Venus, Leo or Libra or Taurus, in relationship to those things Mercury rules, will do much better if it's in a friend's sign, because it's in a friend's house that will support it. Again, this does tie back to Lajatati Avashtas. If a planet's weak, what does that mean? It's in the sign of an enemy. For Mars, if Mars is in the sign of Gemini or Virgo, that can give difficulty. For the Sun, if that planet is in the sign of Venus or Saturn, Capricorn, Aquarius, or Libra or Taurus, that makes the Sun, in a sense, a little weakened, so he might not be able to give strong health or vitality, might not be able to give the inspiration that we would expect from a Sun Dasha. This next principle we have here, if proceeding towards its point of debilitation, its Dasha inclines towards trouble and difficulty. Now that is within the birth chart itself, but, and this is one thing we did cover within the Vimshottari Dasha class, and that MP3 recording available at Asheville Vedic Astrology, we can't just look at the birth chart, the static chart. We also need to look at the transit that's occurring during the Dasha. And many astrologers will look to see when a Dasha begins, where is that planet? So considering the Sun. If the Sun Dasha begins, and it's in Aries where it's exalted, that gives strength to that Dasha. If the Sun is debilitated or moving towards debilitation, that will give less beneficial results of that Dasha. And that's based on where is that planet at the moment the Dasha begins. Okay, so we have to include transits when we consider Dashas. Similar, if proceeding towards point of exaltation, its Dasha will be more auspicious. So it's moving away from Libra, the Sun, moving towards Aries, that will make the Dasha more auspicious. By transit, the moment that the Dasha begins. And once more, it is required that you know the debilitation and exaltation positions of each planet to understand this. Now, this next one is very important. If a planet is well placed in the divisional charts, particularly the Navamsha, although for example the Sun, we would need to look at the Dasamsha, each planet has a particular Varga or divisional chart that it is most supported in, or has a more primary impact and influence. So we need to understand that. But if it's well placed throughout the Vargas, that gives a better experience. And within this this particular set of videos, I will also be getting into the results of houses. It's a little ways down, so stay tuned for this. You might want to subscribe, as I think I have about 24 videos scheduled here. And this is coming, that will be coming particularly from Savarta Chintamani, where one of the primary ways to determine if a house is going to work well is based on, is that planetary lord well supported throughout the Vargas in good dignity? We'll get to that, so don't stress about that at the moment. But that is very important. When you're considering a dasha, see, is that planet well placed throughout the Vargas? The planet that has the best dignity throughout the Vargas, the divisional charts, will do better overall than one, say, that is in difficult dignity. Okay, now we would also consider things like positional strength, as we have listed here. But again, we need to focus on one little step at a time. So consider these principles. And I'd like to highly recommend that you go back and re-listen to this video and write down, take notes, because when you write these things down, it gets in your consciousness, and it's more likely you'll remember these things when you are looking at a chart. And then when you're considering a dasha, you can ask yourself, okay, what does the planet rule over? What is its position? What are the aspects and conjunctions? And you look through the results of planetary strength as listed here. And at the end, you can add like pluses and minuses. So if it has planetary strength, give it a plus. If it's in a good position, give it a plus. If it's lord over a trine or an angle, give it a plus. If it's not, if it's in bad positions, if it's the opposite, give it a negative, and then add those up at the end, and that will give you a better sense of how well is this planet going to work during the particular dasha. Now let's look at Brihat Parashar Hora Shastra before we get to the specific example I have here. So there's the example. So I'm just going to read from Brihat Parashar Hora Shastra. And this is from the version that I have. This cites it as chapter 49. I've seen some other versions that give it a different chapter, but somewhere near chapter 49, Brihat Parashar Hora Shastra. This is on the results of the dashas. And so Maitreya said, O venerable sage, I'm enlightened with the various types of dashas. Kindly apprise me with the nature of their results. And again, previous chapters, Parashara discussed all of the dashas, of which the Vimshottari dasha, the Nakshatra dasha, that Nakshatra dasha is only one. There's many dashas. To really do predictions well, we need to understand these dashas, the Vimshottari, the Nakshatra dashas, as well as the Chara dashas. But again, that's for another time. We need to understand this first. So sage Parashara said, dashas emanate two types of results, one of general nature and two of pronounced nature, which corresponds to the natural characteristics and acquired position in the horoscope of the planets. So what is he saying here? That dashas give two kinds of results. Number one, based on who is the planet we're talking about. Are you in a sun dasha? What does the sun by its very nature mean? What does it rule? What is it a karaka for? It will give results in that regard. The next is, where is the planet placed by position? For an Aries ascendant, the sun rules over the 5th house. For a Virgo ascendant, the sun rules over the 12th house. So those are going to give distinctly different results based on the houses that the planet rules over that we're considering, as well as where the planet goes. And once more, please stay tuned, because we will go into each of the Maha dashas and what their general results are, again, from Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra. Now he goes on to say, the results of the dashas of the planets can be ascertained on the basis of the strengths of the planets. So we've discussed that. The planets in the first drekana give results in the beginning of the dasha, in the second drekana, in the middle of the dasha, in the third drekana, in the concluding part of the dasha. The results of retrograde planets are considered in the reverse order. So there's a lot within this one particular verse. Number one, there's the idea that the results of each planetary dasha are based on the strength of the planets that we're talking about. So that will be the Shadbala of the planet, the position of the planet, the Lajatati of Ashtas of the planet. That will help us understand the quality of the dasha. And you'll see how this is important when we get into each particular dasha. And then he goes on to say that the planet in the first drekana gives results in the beginning of the dasha. Now, we need to understand what the Vargas are. If you're not familiar with the Vargas or how they work, again, I'd like to encourage you to look at The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, Volume 1 and 2, and the chapters on the dasha, so you can see how they're created. But just using this chart here, we would break this down into 3 segments, each house. So if we're looking at Taurus, the first 10 degrees of Taurus is the first drekana. The second 10 degrees, so from 10:01 to 20, would be the second drekana. The third drekana would be 20:01 degrees to 30 degrees. And as we see with Venus here in Taurus in this chart, it's in the second drekana, right? Because it's between 10 and 20. So when this person goes into a Venus dasha, the specific results of that dasha will be felt more acutely during the middle portion of that dasha. Okay, if it would have been in 0 to 10, we'd feel it more in the beginning. If it would be between 20 and 30, more in the third part of the dasha. So we need to understand the drekana first. And if this Venus was retrograde, it would be reverse. Okay. Now, the next verse, the next theme covered. In the event of the Lord of the Dasha being in the ascendant, having benefic aspects, conjunct with benefic planets, exalted in its own sign or in a friendly sign, favorable results will be felt in the beginning of the Dasha. If the planet is posited in the 6th, 8th, or 12th house, debilitated, or in inimical sign or combust, the results will be unfavorable. So again, these are just basic ways of thinking about how a chart is set up. In this chart, we have an exalted Jupiter. And considering this, he does say that when a planet is exalted, that gives favorable results. So particularly for this individual over here, I keep forgetting which side it's on, during a Jupiter dasha, we would expect very favorable results because it's exalted. Now, that is just all other things being equal. And why is that? Because we also see that this Jupiter is being hemmed in by Mars, by Sun, by Saturn. So when this person goes into, say, a Jupiter Mars Saturn dasha, well, what's going to be coming into fruition here? Well, yes, Jupiter will still do good, but since he's hemmed in between 2 malefic planets, during the subcycles of Mars and Saturn, when these 2 planets get activated, that Jupiter is going to experience more obstacles and difficulties and frustrations. Now, he still may be able to overcome it. We need to really assess some other aspects of the chart. But this is giving us a sense of the detail required to look at a dasha. So remember this. In the event of the Lord of the Dasha being in the ascendant, having benefic aspects, conjunct with benefic planets, exalted in its own sign or friendly sign, favorable results will be felt in the beginning of the dasha. If the planet is posited in the 6th, 8th, or 12th, debilitated, or in an enemy sign or combust, the results will be unfavorable. So these are the primary principles that Parashara gives to interpret and understand the dasha sequences. And again, it's not black or white. It's not that cut and dry. It's very rare that we find a planet so well supported that it only gives good things, or so horribly supported that it only gives bad things. Sometimes that happens. But once we understand the Maha dashas, the major cycles that we go through, like a full Mars period, a full Jupiter period, a full Mercury period, well, we can get more precise, because if we say we're in a Jupiter cycle and we go into Jupiter Sun or Jupiter Moon, well, those are planets that through Logitati Avashtas help Jupiter. So during that particular part of the Jupiter cycle, more help will typically be given. If we go into a Jupiter Mercury or Jupiter Venus cycle, oftentimes we'll see that that planet may have some more difficulties. Again, speaking specifically of Jupiter, because Mercury and Venus are enemies of Jupiter. So to refer back to previous principles, one of the other things you really truly have to know before assessing a dasha fully are the enemies, the friends, enemies, and neutrals, so the planetary friendships. That'll give you quite a lot of insight into how to look at the dashas as they break down incrementally into the subcycles. Now let's look at this chart over here. The reason I decided I wanted to use this chart as an example in the beginning is because, again, a lot of people would say, oh, I'm in a Jupiter dasha, therefore everything should work out perfectly well. Or they'll look at Rahu, and they'll see Rahu in the 6th, and they'll say, oh, that's terrible. Who knows what's going to happen during that dasha? It's just going to be a very difficult time period. So when we look at a dasha, remember, we need to look at it in regards to what does the planet mean by its very nature, the fact that it is Rahu, the fact that it is Jupiter. We need to look at the position of the planet. So as we discussed earlier, planets in angles and trines typically do better. They're stronger. Planets in, say, the 6th, 8th, or 12th will often have some difficulties with it, associated with it. But when someone asks you, okay, I'm in this dasha, you're an astrologer, and someone says, I'm in the Jupiter dasha, what does that mean? And really what it seems like they're asking is, give me a paragraph about what to expect within this dasha. And that is so hard to do. Because if you look at this chart, Jupiter is in the 4th house. It is in an angle that's very good. But this Jupiter is also in position from every other house and from every other planet. Which means that, yes, we can give you some general ideas about Jupiter in the 4th. You know, it rules over the 9th house, house of education. It's in the 4th house, house of education. It's exalted, so that can be very good for education. But it's also in the 2nd from the 3rd. It's also in the 3rd from the 2nd. It's also in the 12th from the 5th. It's also in the 11th from the 6th. And it's in the 10th from the 7th. So you can tell so much about a particular planetary cycle, but it's really helpful if you ask someone, or if you encourage your clients to ask you, well, what area of life are you talking about? Because you could spend hours talking about one particular planet from each individual sign. And most of the time people don't really care about everything. They're really asking about one particular area of their life. So this is going to be true for every particular dasha. You're going to need to, if you want to understand it completely, holistically, and well, you're going to need to look at it from every particular house. Where is it placed from every particular house? Where is it placed from each planet? Because each planet means something. Each planet represents something by its own essence. So for example, we have Jupiter in the fourth house here? It's exalted. Well, it's in the second from the third. What can that tell you? During the Jupiter Dasha, maybe this person's going to gain income or wealth or be supported in regards to their hobbies and their interests. Maybe their younger siblings are going to get more wealth, that they're going to have an inflow of more resources. Why? Because that Jupiter, that's what Jupiter would mean in the second from the third. We see that Jupiter is in the 10th from the 7th. Well, that could also tell you that possibly the spouse or partner or business relationships, business partnerships, will do very well during this time. Why? Because when we read the chart from the 7th, Jupiter ends up in the 10th from the 7th. The 7th deals with partnerships and business relationships. So now you can see that we need to know what the houses mean. We need to know what the planets mean so that we can put all these things together. And you can go through every single house and do that. You can do that from every particular planet as a karaka, as an indicator. And if you want to get very detailed, you can do it from each cusp. So we see that these cusps, at least for this particular chart, aren't even in the houses that we would expect them to be in. For more information on that, please review the video on cusps on this channel so you know what I'm talking about here. But you can even look at it from the cusps to get more details. You would also, during a Jupiter Dasha, see where is Jupiter by transit, because you have to put together the transits with the dashas, with the chart, to get an accurate assessment. This past spring semester, we looked into this, the cusps, understanding the cusps. So if you want to know more about the cusps, again, go back to AshevilleVedicAstrology.com, go to the audio and video classes tab, and I think it's Astrological Principles 1 and 2, those particular classes we have there, where we look at and try to understand the cusps so that you can see how to put all these things together. And then you can get very detailed, very good information in this regard. So this is just the beginning of what it takes to understand the dashas. It may seem overwhelming at first, and believe me, I think it is. When I first started learning this, I was very overwhelmed. And sometimes even when I do a person's chart, just the sheer magnitude of the information that you can find, you wonder, well, what should I even say? Which is why when clients contact me, I do ask them to specify between 5 to 8 questions, depending on what kind of work we're doing, that they want me to focus on, so that I can give very good specific information, zeroing in on that particular part of the chart. So take your time with this. Consider one little aspect, one little bit of information, but slowly start to put it all together to see how it comes together to paint a picture of what a person might expect within each Mahadasha period. And again, stay tuned. You might want to subscribe to this channel. Actually, go ahead and subscribe to this channel if you're not already, to learn more, as my plans are to go through each Mahadasha as covered in Brihat Parashar Hora Shastra. Sun, Moon, Mars, Rahu, Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury, Ketu, Venus, so that you can see what the ancient texts say about each dasha. And why do I do this? Well, this was brought up very significantly in the Astrological Principles 1 and 2 classes that we did, because people will think, oh, I'm in a Saturn dasha, or I'm in a Rahu dasha, and that's going to be terrible. Well, if you really go back and read the original texts on astrology, that's not true at all. It's based on where the planet is placed and how it's situated. So we need to keep all of this in mind as we move forward in the study of dashas and the study of timing within our astrological chart. So thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll be in touch soon.